The sun burned hot over the endless desert. The air shimmered like fire above the sand, and no bird, no insect, dared to cross that sky. In the middle of this wasteland lay a young alien woman, her body weak, her lips cracked, her skin covered in dust. Her arms trembled as she tried to push herself up, but the ropes tied around her ankles had been cut only halfway. They had thrown her here, left her, because in her people's eyes, she was nothing. She could not bear children. For them, that meant she was useless. Her eyes stared at the horizon, but there was no hope there. She remembered the moment her family turned away from her. The whispers, the insults, the stares filled with disgust. Empty shell, they had called her. Wasted blood. She had cried and begged, but they did not listen. They carried her to the edge of the desert, forced her to her knees, and pushed her into the sand. She had screamed for mercy, but the only answer was silence. The last thing she saw before they left was the face of her own sister, cold and proud, watching her like a judge over a criminal. Now, hours later, her voice had grown too faint to scream. Every breath was like fire in her chest. The sand felt like knives against her skin. She whispered to herself, almost without sound, "Why am I still alive?" The wind blew across the dunes, carrying away her words as if even nature wanted no part of her sorrow. Her body begged her to give up, to close her eyes, but her mind fought back. She was too young to die, yet too hated to live. In the distance, a shadow moved. At first she thought it was a trick of the heat, another illusion to torture her. But the shape grew larger, steadier. It was not her people returning. They never came back for the cast-out. This was something else. A figure walked slowly, carrying a heavy bag across one shoulder, his steps deep and heavy in the sand. He was a human. She blinked, forcing her tired eyes to focus. Her people had told her humans were weak, fragile, strange creatures who did not belong in the desert. But this one walked with determination, his broad shoulders refusing to bend under the weight. He wore old boots, cracked with age, and his shirt was torn at the sleeve, but he moved like a man with purpose. The girl's heart beat fast with fear. Would he mock her too? Would he turn away, disgusted by what she was? The man slowed when he saw her. His face showed surprise first, then pain, as if her suffering reminded him of something buried deep inside. He dropped his bag and hurried closer. His hands reached out to check her breathing. She coughed weakly, sand spilling from her mouth. He brushed the dust from her face with a gentleness she had never known, even from her family. "You're alive," he said softly, his voice rough but kind. She could not answer, only tremble as tears burned her dry eyes. He pulled a canteen from his side and pressed it against her lips. The water spilled down her throat, cool and strange, making her choke, but she drank every drop she could. The man looked around the empty desert, his jaw tight. He knew what had happened. He had seen it before. These people abandoned those who could not give children, treating them worse than animals. His own heart ached, because once, not long ago, he had held his dying wife in his arms. She had wanted more children, but sickness had stolen her strength. When she passed, the villagers had looked at him with pity, but none offered help. He had carried his grief alone. Now he looked down at this young woman, broken and left for dead. Her lips formed a question between faint gasps. Why? Save me? He did not answer right away. His eyes moved to the endless horizon, where the sun was already sinking lower, painting the dunes red. He could walk away. It would be easy. But the thought of leaving her here, forgotten like dust, tore at him like a knife. He heard his wife's voice in his memory telling him, "Do not let life die alone." He shook his head, bent down, and slipped his arms beneath her frail body. She gasped at the sudden strength, her eyes wide. He lifted her as if she weighed nothing, though his muscles strained under the effort. "You are not worthless," he whispered, more to himself than to her. The desert stretched out ahead, unforgiving, but his steps were steady. With each stride, the girl's heartbeat slowed from panic to disbelief. Her people had abandoned her. They had thrown her away like trash. Yet, here was a human, a stranger, carrying her through the burning sands as if she mattered. Her thoughts swirled between fear and hope. She wanted to believe she had been given a second chance. But doubt still whispered. Would he change his mind? Would he throw her down when it became too hard? Her voice cracked as she whispered, "Leave me. I bring only trouble." The man tightened his grip. "I already lost once. I won't lose again." His words confused her, but his tone carried a weight that silenced her protests. As the desert wind howled behind them, the girl's tears finally fell, soaking his shirt. She did not know where he was taking her. She did not know if she deserved to live. But in that moment, for the first time since her exile, she felt the faint spark of something she thought she had lost forever: hope. And in the distance, beyond the dunes, danger watched. Eyes that did not belong to the human or the girl marked their path. Her people had left her to die, but they were not finished with her story. The man's arms ached as he carried her across the burning sands, but he did not stop. Every step was heavy, the desert pulling at his boots, but he pressed on. The girl's head rested weakly against his chest, her breath shallow, her eyes fluttering between life and death. He whispered to her, though he was not sure she could hear, "Stay with me. Just stay alive." The sun slid lower in the sky, but its heat still pressed down like fire. Sweat dripped down his face, mixing with the dust. He adjusted his grip, shifting her fragile weight higher against his shoulder. She trembled, whispering words he barely caught. "Why? Why save me? I am nothing. Worthless." His chest tightened at her voice. Worthless. The word echoed in his mind like a cruel bell. He remembered when his wife had said the same thing in her final days. She had blamed herself for her sickness, for not giving him more children, though he had never once asked. He had held her hands then, telling her she was everything to him. Now this alien girl, broken by her own people, used the same word. His throat burned as he answered softly, "You are alive. That's enough." She closed her eyes, unable to believe him. No one had ever spoken to her that way. The dunes rose taller ahead, each one like a wall he had to climb. His legs screamed with pain, but his will was stronger. At the top of a ridge, he paused to catch his breath. From there, he could see dark shapes moving in the distance, figures on the sand. His heart clenched. He knew what they were. Alien hunters. They were searching. He crouched low, hiding behind the curve of the dune. The girl stirred, her weak eyes following his gaze. When she saw them, her blood ran cold. She knew those figures too well. The hunters had come for her, not to rescue, but to make sure she was truly gone. Her lips moved shakily. "You must leave me. If they find you with me, they will kill you." The man looked down at her, his face hard but calm. "Then let them try." His voice carried no fear, only a deep, heavy resolve. The hunters stopped far away, scanning the sands with long staffs that glowed faintly in the fading light. One raised a horn and blew it, the sound low and cruel, echoing across the desert. It meant they had caught a trace. The girl's body shook in his arms. She wanted to scream, to tell him to run, but no sound came out. He shifted direction, sliding down the other side of the dune. His boots dug deep, sending sand spilling around them, but he kept his balance. At the bottom, he moved quickly, keeping low to the ground, every sense alive with danger. The girl could feel his heart pounding, not just from effort, but from the weight of the choice he had made. He had chosen her, even if it meant death. Darkness slowly spread across the desert as the sun disappeared. Stars began to pierce the sky one by one, cold and distant, watching silently. The man found a small rocky outcrop, half buried by sand. It was just enough shelter to rest for a moment. He laid her down carefully, leaning her against the stone. She tried to sit up but collapsed, her body too weak. He opened his bag and pulled out a piece of cloth, wrapping it around her shoulders to shield her from the night's cold wind. Then he gave her another sip of water. She coughed, but her eyes softened as she looked at him. No one had ever cared for her like this. Not her family, not her people, no one. But peace did not last long. From beyond the dunes, faint lights flickered. The hunters had lit their staffs, using them to search. She grabbed his sleeve with trembling fingers. "They will find us. They always find us. Please, don't die for me." He placed his hand over hers, steady and firm. "I already buried one family. I won't bury another." His voice was heavy, filled with the memory of his wife's grave. The girl's heart twisted. She wanted to argue, to tell him she was not worth the risk. But something inside her cracked. She had lived her whole life hearing she was empty, but here was a man who looked at her as if her life mattered. Her chest ached, not from weakness, but from the strange, painful spark of hope. The night grew colder. The wind carried whispers across the sand. He stayed awake, watching the horizon, his old rifle resting across his knees. The girl drifted in and out of sleep, haunted by nightmares of her people's faces, her sister's cold eyes, the council's cruel words. Each time she stirred, she saw him sitting there, steady and silent, a wall of protection between her and the world. Hours passed, and the hunters' lights faded into the distance, but the danger was not gone. He knew they would not give up. Tomorrow, they would search again. He would have to move before dawn. When the first light of morning touched the dunes, he lifted her again. His body ached, but his spirit held firm. The girl rested her head against his shoulder, whispering with the last of her strength, "Why do you fight so hard for me?" He looked down at her, his voice quiet but sure. "Because someone should have fought for you long ago." She closed her eyes, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. She did not know if she had the strength to survive, but with every step he took, she felt something she thought she would never feel again. The belief that maybe she was not truly worthless. And behind them, in the desert's shadows, the hunters still moved, patient and merciless, waiting for their chance to strike. The old farmhouse stood alone at the edge of the barren fields, its roof patched with metal sheets, its walls cracked with age. Once it had been full of warmth, the laughter of a little girl echoing through the halls, the smell of bread and soup filling the air. Now it was quiet, almost like a grave, with dust covering the wooden floor and silence pressing against the windows. When the human father pushed open the door and carried the alien girl inside, it was the first time in years that the house felt alive again. He laid her gently on a small bed, one that had once belonged to his daughter. The blanket was old but clean, smelling faintly of sun and soap. She sank into it, her weak body trembling, her eyes wide with confusion. No one had ever treated her like this. She expected him to leave her there, to demand something in return. But instead, he moved quietly, filling a bowl with water, washing the dirt and sand from her face with a rag. She whispered, her voice barely more than air, "Why? Do you care?" He did not answer at first. His jaw tightened, his eyes fixed on the water dripping from the rag. At last, he said, "Because no one cared when I needed them most." His voice cracked with memory, and then he turned away, not explaining more. She wanted to ask, but her body was too weak and her mind too heavy with exhaustion. The next days passed slowly, like fragile steps in a dangerous dance. He brought her food, simple bread, boiled grain, and once, a small piece of dried meat. She ate carefully, afraid it was some trick, but each time he only nodded, watching silently to make sure she had strength. Her body began to recover, though her heart still felt empty. Every night she expected him to change, to throw her outside when he grew tired of her. But each morning he returned with water and warmth. One evening, when the sun fell behind the hills, she tried to stand. Her legs shook badly, and she almost fell, but his hand shot out, steadying her. She looked up at him, her voice bitter. "I should not be here. Your people will hate me. My people already do. Why waste your time?" He held her arm firmly, meeting her eyes. "You are here because you deserve a chance. Everyone does." His words struck her like lightning. No one had ever said such a thing to her before. That night, as the wind howled outside, she lay awake in the bed, staring at the cracked ceiling. She thought of the council that had sentenced her to exile. She thought of her family's cold eyes. And then she thought of the human, sitting near the fire, his rifle leaning against the wall, watching the door as if to guard her from the world. A strange warmth spread inside her chest, something she had not felt since childhood. But peace was not safe in this house. The village nearby had sharp eyes and sharper tongues. Already, whispers had begun. Someone had seen footprints in the sand, too small to belong to the farmer alone. Someone had noticed him carrying extra water. Curiosity turned quickly to suspicion, and suspicion to anger. One morning, as she helped him with small chores, passing him tools as he fixed a broken fence, she noticed shadows moving at the edge of the fields. Two men stood there, watching silently. Their arms crossed, their faces hard. She froze, fear rushing through her veins. He noticed too, his hand tightening around the hammer. The men turned away after a long moment, but she knew they would return. That evening, she spoke in a whisper, her hands shaking. "They will come for me. They will kill you too. Please, let me leave." He turned toward her, his face lined with scars of grief, his eyes steady. "I let go once. I won't do it again." She did not understand his words, but the fire in his voice silenced her protests. As the days passed, she grew stronger. She began to move around the house more freely, cleaning dust from the shelves, lighting the old lanterns, and once even baking bread with clumsy hands. He watched her, surprised at how the house no longer felt empty. When she smiled faintly at her small success, his heart ached, remembering the way his daughter used to smile. One night, as they sat by the fire, she finally asked the question that had haunted her. Why did they throw me away? Why is being barren worse than death? His eyes darkened. He leaned forward, poking the fire with a stick. Because they are afraid of weakness. They think life only has meaning if it can create more life. They forget that living itself is meaning enough. Her throat tightened, tears filling her eyes. No one had ever spoken to her like this. She wanted to believe him, but the scars on her heart were too deep. She lowered her gaze, whispering, "I am still empty." He shook his head firmly. "You are not empty. You are alive, and as long as you breathe, you have worth." Her tears slipped down her cheeks, and she turned away so he would not see. But outside, the danger grew closer. In the shadows of the night, a group of villagers gathered, their voices low, their faces filled with anger. They spoke of betrayal, of strange tracks, and of a man who dared to hide what should have been cast out. They planned to visit the farmhouse soon, not with questions, but with fire. Inside, the girl finally drifted to sleep, her breathing calm for the first time in weeks. The man sat by the window, staring into the dark, feeling the storm that was coming. He had saved her from the desert, but he knew the fight was only beginning. And he was ready. The night was heavy with silence, but inside the farmhouse, both of them could feel the weight of unseen eyes. The girl sat by the fire, her hands curled around a wooden cup of water, though she barely drank. The man cleaned his rifle, his movements slow and careful, but his eyes were sharp, fixed on the shadows that stretched beyond the windows. He had lived long enough to know when danger was close. Whispers had spread through the village like fire on dry grass. The human farmer was hiding someone. Tracks had been seen in the sand, smaller than his. Lanterns burned late at his house when no one else kept watch. And worse, an alien girl was missing. The council had declared her condemned, cast out for her sterility, but now suspicion grew that she had not died in the desert as intended. Someone must have broken the law. Someone must have sheltered her. The council gathered at dawn, their voices cold and sharp. "The human has always been strange," one elder said. "He keeps to himself, never joins the feasts, never obeys our ways." Another spat in the dust. "His weakness is dangerous. If he is hiding her, he defies our judgment. That cannot be forgiven." By the end of their meeting, the decision was made. They would search his farm. If they found her there, both would face punishment. The girl knew nothing of this council talk, but her heart was uneasy. As she helped the man fix the shutters that day, she asked him in a soft voice, "Do you ever regret finding me? If I bring danger to your home?" He paused for a long moment, his hammer frozen in his hand. Then he looked at her with steady eyes and said, "I regret nothing. You were left to die. I will not do what they did." His words carried such weight that she could not answer. That evening, as the sun sank and the sky burned red, footsteps crunched outside the farmhouse. The man stiffened instantly. He set down his tools, grabbed his rifle, and motioned for her to stay silent. Her heart raced as she moved back into the corner, her breath shallow. The door shook with a heavy knock. "Open, human," a voice commanded. "We know you are hiding something." The man's jaw tightened. Slowly he opened the door. 3 villagers stood there, torches in hand, their eyes cold with suspicion. "We have orders from the council," one said. "We will search your home." He blocked the doorway with his body. "This is my house," he said calmly. "You will not step inside." The tallest villager sneered. "Then you confess your guilt. Only a criminal would deny us entry." "I deny you because you come with hate," he replied. His voice was low but firm, like a wall that refused to move. Inside, the girl crouched low, her body trembling. She could hear every word. The villagers tried to push past him, but he shoved one back with his arm, the strength in his frame surprising them. "Go back," he warned, his finger resting near the trigger of his rifle. "You will not find what you seek here." The men spat curses and retreated, but not before one pointed a torch toward the house and growled, "The council will not forgive this. We will return." When the door closed, the girl stumbled out of hiding, tears streaming down her face. "They will kill you," she whispered. Because of me. You should have let them in. He shook his head sharply. If I let them in, they would have dragged you out into the dirt. You think I could watch that happen? Her knees gave out, and she fell to the floor, sobbing. I am nothing. I am only trouble. Why do you fight for me? His eyes softened, and for a long time, he did not speak. Then he knelt beside her, placing a rough but gentle hand on her shoulder. Because no one fought for me when I needed it. Because no one should face death alone. The next day, the air in the village was heavy with anger. The council spread word. The human was protecting the barren one. This was treachery, a crime against their laws. Some wanted to burn his farm that very night. Others wanted him dragged before the council and judged. Either way, his choice to shelter her had become open rebellion. Back at the farmhouse, the girl sat by the window, watching the fields sway under the hot wind. Her chest felt tight with fear. She knew the hunters would return, and this time, not only with questions. Her hands gripped the edge of the windowsill until her knuckles turned white. She whispered to herself, maybe I should run. Maybe if I leave, they will spare him. But when she looked at the man, busy preparing supplies, sharpening tools, and stacking firewood, she realized he was ready to fight for her no matter what she decided. For the first time, she felt the weight of his words, that her life mattered. That night, the farmhouse was wrapped in silence. The girl lay awake, unable to sleep, every creak of wood making her heart jump. Outside, the wind carried faint sounds, voices moving in the dark, the crackle of torches. The villagers had come again. She sat up, panic filling her chest. But before she could speak, the man placed a hand on her shoulder. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with fire. Stay quiet, he whispered. He led her down into a hidden space beneath the floorboards, a place once used to store grain. She crouched there in the dark, her heart pounding, listening to the footsteps above. The door burst open. Heavy boots stomped through the house. Voices growled, searching, overturning furniture. She is here. She must be here. One voice came closer, so close she could hear his breathing above her hiding place. A floorboard creaked. She held her breath, her body shaking violently, her hand pressed against her mouth to silence her fear. The man stood firm, his rifle in hand. You will not find her, he said. For a long moment, silence stretched through the house. Then one villager laughed cruelly. Not tonight, human, but soon. And when we come back, we will not ask. The footsteps retreated, the door slammed, and the voices faded into the night. The girl crawled out of hiding, her face pale, her body trembling. She collapsed against the wall, gasping for breath. He helped her up, his hand steady on her back. They will come again, she whispered, fear choking her. Yes, he said, his voice quiet but unshaken. And when they do, I will be ready. For the first time in her life, she realized she was not alone. Someone had chosen to stand beside her, even against an entire village. And in the darkness of that night, as the fire burned low, she began to believe in something she had never dared to before. Hope that maybe she was worth saving. The days grew tense in the farmhouse. Every sound outside made the girl flinch. Every shadow on the horizon made her heart race. Yet inside those cracked walls, she began to find a rhythm of life she had never known before. She tried to help the human father, though her hands were clumsy at first. She swept the floors, carried small buckets of water, and even tried kneading dough the way she had seen him do. Each time she failed, he only smiled faintly and showed her again, patient as if teaching a child. Slowly, she started to feel less like a burden and more like she belonged. One afternoon, while sunlight spilled through the broken window, she picked up his tools to help repair a broken fence. The wood was heavy, and her arms shook as she tried to hold it steady. He came beside her, guiding her grip with his large, weathered hands. Like this, he said gently. For a moment, she felt warmth spread through her chest. No one had ever guided her without anger, without mocking her weakness. When the fence stood upright, she looked at him shyly. I did it. He gave a rare smile, small but true. Yes, you did. That night, as she lay in the bed that once belonged to his daughter, she thought of her past. The council's harsh words echoed in her memory. Empty, useless, unworthy. But now, for the first time, another voice pushed against those memories. A voice that told her she was more than what they had said. Yet danger was never far. One evening, the sound of voices drifted across the fields. She froze at the window and saw distant torches moving. The villagers were gathering again. Fear crushed her chest. She turned to him in panic. "They are coming. I must run. If I leave, they will not harm you." But he stepped forward, firm and steady. "If you leave, they will hunt you down. If you stay, at least you are not alone. I will not send you away." His voice carried such power that she could not argue. Later that night, while the world outside slept, she whispered her truth into the silence. "All my life they called me broken. They said a woman who cannot give life is not a woman at all. I believed them. I thought I was less than nothing." Her tears slid down her face, glistening in the firelight. "But here I feel like I am alive again." He did not speak right away. His eyes stared into the fire, remembering his wife, the pain of her illness, the way she had begged forgiveness for something that was never her fault. At last, he said, "They are wrong. You are alive. That is enough. Life is more than children or rules. It is breath. It is choice. And you have both." She wiped her tears with trembling fingers, her chest aching with emotions she did not understand. But peace shattered when, at dawn, smoke rose on the horizon. The villagers were not simply gathering this time. They came armed with more than words. The girl watched in terror as 3 men approached the farm, carrying torches and axes. The man loaded his rifle calmly, his face carved with determination. The men shouted from the edge of the field, "Hand her over! She is cursed, and you are cursed with her." The human father stepped onto his porch, rifle in hand, his voice loud and steady. "You will not take her, not while I stand." The girl clutched the window frame, her heart pounding so hard it hurt. She could not believe it. This man, this human, was ready to fight against his own neighbors, against her people's law, for her. Her throat tightened as tears spilled down again. She wanted to scream at him to stop, to save himself, but her voice was locked in her chest. The villagers hurled insults, swearing they would return with fire if he did not give her up. He did not flinch. He only lifted the rifle slightly, his finger near the trigger. The men cursed but retreated for now, spitting into the dust as they left. Inside, the girl collapsed to the floor, her whole body shaking. He walked back in, closing the door firmly behind him. She turned to him, her voice broken. "Why? Why do you fight for me? I am nothing." He placed the rifle down and knelt before her, gripping her shoulders gently but firmly. "Because you are not nothing, because I already lost one family, and I will not lose another." His words hit her like thunder, leaving her speechless. Her lips trembled. "Another? Family?" He nodded, his eyes dark with memory. "My wife, my daughter, both gone. This house was empty until you came. Now I have someone to protect again." Her tears spilled freely now, not just of sorrow, but of something deeper, something she had never felt before. She whispered, almost in disbelief, "You see me as family?" "Yes," he said simply, with no hesitation. That night, as the fire burned low, she sat beside him in silence. She thought of the life she had lost, of the people who had abandoned her, and for the first time, she thought perhaps she had found something greater. But outside, in the cold darkness, the villagers gathered once more. Their anger grew hotter than their torches. They had seen the defiance of the human farmer. They had heard his words, and they knew he would never surrender the girl willingly. The girl did not know it yet, but the storm that was coming would test the strength of both their hearts. She had been called broken, worthless, empty. But now, with this man standing at her side, she would have to decide if she truly believed that, or if she was ready to fight for the second chance he had given her. The night smelled of smoke before the girl even saw it. She sat up suddenly in the bed, her heart racing. Outside, faint orange light flickered across the window. The man was already awake, standing with his rifle in hand, his jaw tight. "They've come," he said quietly. His voice was calm, but his eyes burned with fire. The girl ran to the door, peeking through the cracks. Torches lit the dark fields, moving closer and closer. At least a dozen villagers marched across the sand, their faces twisted with rage. Some carried axes, others long staffs glowing faintly, and all of them shouted the same words again and again. "Bring her out! Burn the curse away!" Her body trembled. She turned to him in panic. "Please, let me go to them. If they take me, they will spare you." But he shook his head sharply, his voice rising like steel. "I will not hand you to them. I already lost once. I will not lose again." He moved quickly, pulling her toward the back of the farmhouse. "Stay low. If they break in, you run. Do not look back." She clutched his sleeve, shaking her head desperately. No, they will kill you. I cannot let you die because of me. He stopped, his face inches from hers. Listen to me. Your life has worth. I will fight to prove it, even if it costs mine. Before she could answer, the front door shuddered under a heavy blow. Wood splintered. The villagers shouted louder, demanding her. The girl froze in terror, her hands pressed against her mouth to stop her scream. The man lifted his rifle, his body steady as stone. The door burst open, and firelight spilled inside. 3 men stormed in, torches raised high. Where is she? One shouted. The barren one! Give her to us! The man aimed his rifle at the first intruder. Step back. This is my home. You will not take her. The villagers hesitated. They had not expected him to resist so fiercely. But their anger was greater than their fear. One of them swung his axe at the wooden table, splitting it in 2. We will burn this house down with both of you in it. The girl gasped, her whole body trembling. She wanted to run forward, to beg them for mercy, but the man's arm blocked her. He fired a warning shot into the wall, the sound exploding through the farmhouse. The villagers stumbled back in shock, but only for a moment. Rage replaced fear. They rushed forward. The fight was brutal and desperate. The man swung the butt of his rifle into one attacker's chest, sending him crashing into the wall. Another villager raised his torch, but the girl, driven by pure fear, grabbed a clay jug and smashed it against his arm. The torch fell to the floor, sparks scattering across the wood. Smoke rose instantly. Fire! Someone screamed. The farmhouse filled with smoke as flames crawled hungrily across the old boards. The girl coughed, her eyes burning. The man grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the back door, but another villager blocked their way. He held a glowing staff, its tip crackling with strange energy. She is cursed, he shouted. Let her die. The man roared, swinging his rifle with all his strength. The staff cracked, its light fading, and the villager fell hard into the dirt. Without waiting, the man dragged the girl outside. Behind them, the farmhouse blazed with fire, the home that once held his wife and daughter collapsing into ash. The girl looked back in horror. Your house, it's gone! Because of me! But he did not stop moving. His face was dark with grief, but his voice was unshaken. A house can burn, but life cannot be replaced. They stumbled into the open fields, chased by shouts and torches. The villagers spread out, hunting them through the night. The girl's legs shook, her breath sharp and painful. She wanted to stop, to surrender, but the man pulled her forward. Run. As long as you can breathe, you run. At last, they reached the old barn at the far edge of the fields, half broken and covered in vines. He pushed her inside, barring the door with a heavy plank. They both collapsed to the ground, coughing from smoke and exhaustion. For a long time, only their ragged breaths filled the air. Finally, she spoke, her voice cracking. Why? Why keep fighting? I told you, I am cursed. I bring nothing but ruin. He turned his face toward her, sweat and soot streaking his skin. You are not cursed. They are blind. They fear what they do not understand. But I will not let their fear decide your worth. Her tears fell freely. She reached for his hand, gripping it tightly, as if letting go would mean death. They will come again, she whispered. I know, he said. His eyes were tired, but his grip was steady. And when they do, I will stand again, as many times as it takes. Through the cracks in the barn wall, the glow of fire still painted the night. The farmhouse that once carried memories of love was gone, reduced to smoke and ashes. But inside the barn, as the girl lay with her head against his shoulder, something stronger than fire burned between them, a promise that no matter what came, she was no longer alone. Outside, the villagers regrouped, their anger not yet satisfied. They would return, stronger, determined to finish what they had started. But the girl no longer trembled the same way she once had. For the first time, she felt that perhaps she was worth protecting, worth saving. And with that thought, hope began to rise inside her like a fragile flame, refusing to die. The dawn broke slow and gray, the sky heavy with smoke from the burned farmhouse. The man stood at the edge of the barn, his rifle resting across his knees, eyes sharp on the horizon. His body was exhausted, his clothes black with soot, but his spirit remained unbroken. Beside him, the girl stirred awake, her face pale but calmer than before. She had dreamed of fire and death, but when she opened her eyes and saw him still there, guarding her, she felt safe again. She sat up slowly, wrapping the old blanket around her shoulders. For a long moment, she simply watched him, The way he stayed still, listening to the wind for danger. Finally, she whispered, "You lost everything last night. Your house, your memories. Why did you not let me go?" He looked at her, his face lined with both sorrow and strength. "Because I already lost one family. I will not lose another." His voice was firm, but in his eyes she saw the pain of the past. She lowered her head, her chest heavy with guilt. The day passed in silence, broken only by the cries of crows circling the fields. They did not dare to leave the barn, knowing the villagers were still searching. The girl tried to help, fetching water from a small cracked barrel, sweeping the dusty floor, but every sound outside made her freeze. She could not stop imagining the angry faces of her people, the fire in their hands. Yet each time fear rose, she looked at the man, yet standing steady like a wall of stone, and her heart eased a little. By evening, their worst fear became true. The villagers returned. From the cracks in the barn wall, she saw them gathering in the fields again, more than before. They carried weapons, their torches burning bright against the dark. She pressed her hands over her mouth, her body shaking. "They will kill us tonight," she whispered. The man loaded his rifle slowly, his movements calm. "Then tonight, they will learn what it means when a human stands." She grabbed his arm, tears spilling down her cheeks. "No, please, you cannot fight them all. Let me surrender. If I go, they will leave you in peace." He pulled her hand gently away, his gaze steady. "If you go, they will not spare you, and without you, this fight means nothing. You are my family now. I will not abandon you." The barn door rattled under heavy fists. Voices shouted, "Open up! Hand her over!" The girl clung to him, her whole body trembling. The wood cracked, torches flickered through the gaps. Smoke of burning straw filled the air again. The man raised his rifle. "Stay behind me," he ordered. She wanted to protest, but his voice left no room for argument. The doors burst open, and the villagers stormed in. Firelight painted their faces cruel and twisted. "There she is," one shouted. "The barren one." But before they could reach her, the man fired. The blast thundered through the barn, making the attackers stumble back. His eyes burned with fury, his stance unshaken. "You will not take her," he shouted. "Not while I draw breath." Chaos followed. Villagers rushed forward with staffs and axes, but he fought like a man who had nothing left to lose. He swung his rifle, struck with his fists, shoved them back with raw strength. The girl crouched behind the broken stall, her heart tearing with every sound of struggle. She could not bear to see him fall. At last, a staff struck his side and he staggered. The villagers cheered, pressing forward. The girl cried out, running to his side. She threw herself in front of him, spreading her arms wide. "Stop!" she screamed. "If you want death, take me, not him." The barn fell silent. The villagers stared at her, shocked. Her people had always seen her as worthless, a thing to be discarded. Yet here she stood, ready to give her life for another. For the first time, doubt flickered in their eyes. The man gritted his teeth, pulling himself back to his feet. He placed his hand on her shoulder and moved her gently aside. His voice thundered across the barn. "You called her empty. You called her nothing. But I tell you, she is worth more than all your laws and all your fear." The villagers hesitated. Their anger cracked under the weight of his words, under the sight of the girl's bravery. One by one, torches lowered. Some muttered, some turned away, ashamed. They had come expecting to destroy weakness, but instead they had found strength they could not understand. At last, only silence filled the barn. The villagers retreated, their footsteps fading into the night. The girl collapsed to her knees, sobbing with relief. The man dropped beside her, his breath heavy, his body bruised, but still alive. She turned to him, tears running down her face. "I don't understand. Why fight so hard for me? I was cast out. I am broken." He reached out, brushing her tears away with a rough but gentle hand. "You are not broken. They blinded themselves to your worth. But I saw you, and I will keep seeing you as long as I live." Her heart ached, not from despair, but from something she had never felt before, a sense of being loved, of being wanted. She buried her face against his chest, her voice shaking. "Then let me stay. Let me be your family." He wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. "You already are," he whispered. Outside, the first light of dawn touched the world, turning the smoke into silver clouds. The farmhouse was gone, the barn broken, but inside them something stronger had been built. She, who had been cast out and left for dead, had found a home. and he, who had lost everything, had found someone to protect again. For the first time, the girl did not feel cursed. She felt alive. She felt safe. And as the sun rose, she knew one truth above all. She had been given a second chance, and this time she would not waste it.